Fasten your seatbelts because the FIA has just announced new rules that will shake up the grid in ways you won't believe. Mule cars, crazy penalties, and even changes to the brakes. Want to know how this will affect the drivers and how the teams will continue their developments? Stick around because we're going to break it all down in the next few minutes. Let's go. Guys, have you heard of mule cars? No, I'm not talking about rural transportation. In F1, these cars are true laboratories on wheels. The FIA has just approved 10 days of testing with these prototypes, targeting the changes for 2026. But what does this mean in practice? Imagine this. Teams can take cars from the last 4 seasons and transform them into future machines. It's like traveling through time and testing 2026 technologies today. These tests will be crucial for teams to understand how the new regulations will work on the track. But hold on, it's not that simple. Teams will have to break their heads to decide which car to use as a base. Is it better to take a pre-2022 car, which is smaller and more similar to what's coming? Or is it better to use a current car and try to adapt it? This decision could be the difference between starting on pole or at the back of the grid in 2026. Speaking of starting on pole, let's move on to our next topic that will directly affect qualifying. Remember that confusion at the Chinese GP with Carlos Sainz? He ended up damaging the car's front wing and was stuck for several minutes. The stewards decided to deploy the red flag to stop the session. However, Sainz returned to the pits without external assistance and managed to continue, eventually qualifying 7th. At the time, Aston Martin raised the issue and protested the classification result, which was rejected by the stewards. Well, now the FIA has decided to set things straight. Article 39.6 now states, any driver whose car stops in any area other than the pit lane during the qualifying session or sprint qualifying session and receives physical assistance will not be permitted to continue participating in that session. No more finding a way to get back into the session. This change brings greater clarity for future similar events that may occur in the upcoming races after the August break, and should prevent the need for new protests from other teams. And speaking of heating things up, let's talk about penalties. Now things got serious, folks. The FIA has revamped the penalty system, and believe it or not, this can completely change the race results. First, that story of escaping punishment by retiring from the race? Over. Remember Alonso's case in the Chinese sprint? Fernando Alonso had a collision with Sainz on lap 9 while attempting to overtake the Ferrari driver, which cost him a time penalty. However, as the two-time world champion had to retire his car before the end of the race, this penalty was not served at any point. Well, now if a driver receives a time penalty and cannot serve it due to retirement, this penalty turns into a loss of positions on the grid for the next race. No more getting off scot-free. But there's more. 5 or 10-second penalties can now be carried over to the next race if the driver doesn't finish the race. It's like the FIA is saying, you didn't finish the race? No problem. We'll save your penalty for the next one. This will completely change team strategies. Imagine, your driver is last with a penalty to serve. Is it worth continuing in the race, or is it better to retire and try to minimize the damage in the next GP? These are decisions that can define championships. And now, let's talk about something that makes every F1 engineer's heart race: technical changes. The FIA decided to stir the pot and altered the rules on braking systems. Looks like someone's been up to no good, huh? The new Regulation 11.1 bans any system that produces asymmetric braking on a specific axle. But it doesn't stop there. The flexibility of front wings is also under the FIA's scrutiny. After a protest from Red Bull against McLaren and Mercedes, Spa turned into a censor festival to ensure everyone is playing fair. These technical changes can shuffle the grid. Who's going to come out on top? Who will have to go back to the drawing board? Only time will tell. Now let's get to what really matters. How will these changes affect the title fight? The teams chasing Red Bull might have found a light at the end of the tunnel. Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes, who are still developing their cars, could benefit from these updates. It's like the FIA has given a partial reset to the championship. Will we finally see someone challenge Red Bull on equal footing? Honestly, we're already seeing a less dominant Red Bull. But it's not just about car development. These new rules will require quick adaptation from teams and drivers. Whoever can understand and best exploit the changes in brake and aerodynamic regulations might make a competitive leap. Think about it. What if McLaren, which has already shown recent improvement, can take advantage of these new rules? Or if Ferrari finally nails its strategy and reliability to capitalize on these changes? And let's not forget Mercedes, which has the resources and know-how to bounce back. At Red Bull, our friend Max Verstappen is already playing it cool. He said the team always seeks more performance, but sometimes you have to be realistic and maintain the achieved level. Is this a sign of concern or just the good old F1 mind games? The fact is, Red Bull will have to work hard to keep its edge. With the new mule car testing rules, all teams will have the chance to experiment and innovate with 2026 in mind. This could level the playing field and bring surprises for upcoming seasons. Another interesting point is how these changes might affect midfield teams. Imagine if a Haas or an Aston Martin can better interpret these new rules and make a performance leap. We could see a significant shift in the grid hierarchy. One thing is certain, 2024 promises to be a season of surprises. With so many changes, it could be the opportunity other teams were waiting for to reach the top. So folks, crazy, right? The FIA really decided to shake up the grid with these new rules. We have changes in testing, penalties, technical regulations, and even how teams will develop their cars for the future. What can we expect? Well, one thing is for sure. The F1 of 2024 is going to be even more exciting and unpredictable. Will we see new names fighting for victory? Will overtakes become easier or harder? And what will happen when the 2026 cars finally arrive? These changes don't just affect the teams and drivers, but also us, the fans. We'll have to pay even more attention to technical details, race strategies, and even steward decisions. Every practice session, every qualifying lap, and every pit stop could be decisive under these new rules. Imagine this. We might see even more thrilling races, with more overtakes and fierce battles. Or, who knows, we could have surprise poles, with smaller teams achieving impressive results in qualifying. The penalties carried over between races could create unprecedented and exciting situations in GPs. And let's not forget the long-term impact. Mule car testing aimed at 2026 could completely change the game. Who knows, we might see a revolution in aerodynamics or car design. Maybe some team will discover a brilliant solution that changes the course of F1 in the coming years. Only time will tell. But one thing I guarantee, we'll be here to follow every lap, every change, and every controversy. F1 is entering a new era, and it promises to be one of the most exciting in the sport's history. If you want to stay on top of all these changes and their impacts, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's uncover all the mysteries this new F1 will bring us together. Until the next race, folks.